Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming to this particular panel. I'm extremely pleased to be sharing with you some of the work that I have done in the past 5 years. So maybe I should start off by saying that I joined the Chinese University of Hong Kong very recently in August of 2013. So the work that I'm about to present has actually nothing to do with the Chinese University of Hong Kong. And in fact, it was something that I have done for the Seattle Art Museum when I served as the curator of Chinese art for the past 7 years, from 2006 up until 2013. And this is a online catalog that I have done for SAM for the past 5 years, from 2008 up until 2013. And let me start off by giving you some background. And this is basically the orientation of my presentation. I will spend probably the first 5 minutes to talk about the background of this, or the origin of this project. And I should also give you that 1-line or 2-line answer to the panel that that addresses the subject of this panel, which is the new norm for studying Chinese painting. And that really is just a very simple answer that I would say in 2 lines. Now, then the second part of this presentation we will review the new website that was just launched in September, and then we'll go through some of the functionalities. But I will refrain myself from spending too much time to talk about the website, because the goal of this panel is not to sell you the website that we have created, but then I really want to spend more time to discuss the lessons learned. And in fact, having heard the panel with all of you about this keynote presentation that was just given to us, I have some thoughts which I would like to share with you afterwards too. So without further ado, how did this project come about? In 2008, the Getty Foundation selected 9 museums in the world to think about ways to introduce museum collections online. So the Seattle Art Museum was one of those 9 museums, together with the Tate Britain, the Free Sacco Gallery, SF MoMA, and Walker Art Center, the Getty Museum, and Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and several other institutions. And the idea of selecting these 9 museums is such that each museum will pick a part of the collection to be cataloged online. And the premise for this wide range of museums is such that for a museum to pick its collection, each institution is bound to face certain issues that are central to the collection that they are cataloging. So, for instance, the Seattle Art Museum has decided to pick the Chinese painting and calligraphy collection, and that is fairly unique in the group. But so is other people's choices. For instance, the Art Institute of Chicago picked the Renoir, the collection of Impressionist paintings, the Renoirs, and then SF MoMA picked the Rauschenberg collection. So each museum picked different sectors, different collections, and the Getty wanted to see by these collections what are the range of issues that would come up when museums choose to catalog the collections online. Now, there are 2 things that are quite interesting about Seattle's choice. Picking classical painting and calligraphy in itself, it's not necessarily an interesting issue for an online catalog per se, but what is interesting about this choice for classical painting and calligraphy is that it was not a particularly strong collection in the Seattle Art Museum. So for that alone, the Seattle Art Museum turned out to be a very unique case among the Getty Online Scholarly Catalog Initiative, whereas all 8 other museums chose their collection strengths to be cataloged. The Seattle Art Museum actually picked a relatively weak area, even in its Chinese art collection. Because in our Chinese art collection, we had a much better jade collection. We had a fairly comprehensive Chinese ceramics collection. So if we had chosen to catalog our ceramics collection or our jade collection, we could have presented a fairly comprehensive history of Chinese ceramics or Chinese jade. But instead, we chose classical paintings and calligraphy. The question is, why? Now, the reason is because we have, that collection is about 150 works. So we thought that, well, this is a fairly small collection, so it would be manageable. And that was a good thing for the institution. And the second reason was that we had hoped to raise the profile of this particular collection, because even though the Seattle Art Museum has one of the greatest collection of Chinese art in North America, its holdings of classical painting and calligraphy were relatively weak. But classical painting and calligraphy are considered to be the most esteemed form of Chinese art. So there's a contradiction there. How do we make up for this weakness? And we wanted to make up for that weakness by drawing more attention to this genre. And therefore, we have chosen this particular area to catalog, hoping that it would raise more interest in this field. And that's the premise. Now, my one-line answer for the new norm for studying Chinese painting and calligraphy online is that this new norm that we're going to discuss is that we will expect the general public and students or users of the web to learn alongside with the experts, scholars, curators, and academics in the online environment. That really is the main difference, as that is my takeaway in doing this project. Whereas in the traditional format, which is the printed catalog, oftentimes you have the scholar spending multiple years and then finally crystallizing their scholarship into this telephone book, and then they present that book to the general public. And so this is a very top-down way of distributing knowledge. But on the other hand, for what the online environment has encouraged us to do, it's not necessarily that we are, well, it's one, that we are on a more equal platform, but also I think the public is also quite eager to see what the museum has. And then the public, whether it is the experts or the general audience, they could also contribute their knowledge to the to the museum expertise. So let's just get to the catalog in a minute. And I'm very pleased to say that in doing this project, we were very lucky to get the support and the partnership of Gallery Systems, and I want to single out Jay Hoffman, the CEO of Gallery System here, and his colleague Paul, who have worked very closely with the Seattle Art Museum for the past 5 years. You have to imagine that a project that spans 5 years, that's half a decade, that's actually a very long time. We have had some rocky relationships with, in doing the projects, but Gallery System is extremely gracious in meeting our requests, and oftentimes in short timelines, and we will actually go through some of those difficulties and challenges, because I think for your purpose, in your planning for an online catalog, I think this might actually be more interest to you to learn about those those instances. So this is the homepage of our catalog. Uncover the past, discover Chinese painting and calligraphy collection at the Seattle Art Museum, and then you just. There are several ways that you can search. The purpose of this homepage is really intended for two types of people: the experts or the general audience who is interested to see, what is out there, what is in the Seattle Art Museum. If they come to this website without any assumption as to what they may find, then they can just click explore the collection. But for an expert who knows, I know that the Seattle Art Museum has this one painting by Shenzhou, I have to see it, then they can just type search button and just search that particular work, that artist, or the museum accession number, and that will take them straight to that work. But for the purpose of this meeting, let's just see the collection. Okay. So here you basically it's taking time to load all 150 images. And basically what you see here is that you see a thumbnail of image, and then basic tombstone information. You click on it, and then you then you'll find more detailed information. Let's just go to one of these images. Now, there are some pretty standard features that that are expected of an online catalog, such as the ability to zoom in, so you are able to do that, which is really quite nice for the art expert to be able to see the materials and some great details. And then the detailed information about the artworks will be on these tabs. So this work is, this 12th, 13th century work is by an unknown artist, and then you can add it to your collection and date. But let me go to actually another work that will show. So the same thing here, you can zoom in most of all of these images. Now I think to me, I think the real innovation, not in a technological sense, but the real innovation in this catalog is the ability for the scholars to, for any visitor to read all the inscriptions in these calligraphies. And what we have done here is that we have transcribed the Chinese calligraphy into modern Chinese, and then we have also put it, provided the English translation on the side, and then you can click on different sections. That really is a breakthrough in the catalog, to the extent that what I realized later is this is not just a catalog for the art historians, but to a large extent it is also very helpful for those experts in Chinese literature, because some of these poems or inscriptions were actually very famous Chinese poetry that have, for some reason, have never been translated into English. And we have spent a lot more time in doing those kind of translation work than we had previously assumed. And then for many of these artworks, we have an in-depth essay and written by various people, and this one happens to be written by me, and then you can click on read more. Okay, but we don't have to read the essay now. Now, another innovative aspect about this catalog, which again is not a technological innovation, is our keen desire to incorporate or to encourage a dialogue in the scholarly community. We have this we conceived of this section called Questions for Thought, and basically it's a way for us, the curators and the museum, people who have known about these scrolls for a long time, to raise questions that hopefully will get other scholars to chip in, because we don't want to assume that whichever essay that we provided here has the definitive work about has the definitive word about this work. So that's the purpose of having this questions for thought. And sometimes in other works that are included in this particular catalog, we have also included essays written by really famous scholars. And sometimes, because some of those scholars are also my teachers, I would raise questions that would bring in another line of arguments. So I didn't want to contradict what they say, but I do it kind of cunningly by raising questions and hoping that other people would raise those objects or whatever, and trying to stimulate a debate that is going on here. So there are at least 3 places where people can actually comment on a work of art here. One is they can comment, they can respond to these questions that we've raised. They can also add a comment to the work of art, because some people may have no issues with the essays, but they may just say, well, actually, is this a genuine work? And because this calligraphy or this inscription, this signature doesn't look right or whatever, then they can post their comments here. And they can also specify, that their comments by tagging, by putting a region and say, look at this particular tree branch, and look at this signature. This is different from the one that you would see, say, from the National Palace Museum in Taipei or whatever. So we have provided this kind of functionality for the viewer to use. And then there are some pretty standard information, which is exhibition history and publication history. And then we have also provided a bibliography, which is different from the exhibition history and publication history, because the bibliography is just a way for people, it's a way for us to show that we're up to date in our scholarship, and to encourage the user to find more information about this particular artist or related works. In some other examples, let me find here. Okay. Well, anyway, I was going to say that for some of the examples, they are also related works in the same tab, and maybe there's one. May have it. Yes, related works. So for some of the works on view, we will have related works. And for instance, here you see Plum Blossom, and then it is a way for us to include other paintings in the collection so that we can relate one work to several other works in the collection. And here, related works is a concept that is used very loosely. It's because the collection is so small, it's not as though we have 10 works by the same artist where we can call it these are the related works, but we are using this notion very loosely to draw attention to other works that hopefully people will get a better sense of what the collection has. So that concludes a quick summary of the functionality of this kind of individual works. Let's go back to search and for me, one of the most interesting thing about this project is how we try to encourage the user to curate, the Seattle collection, and that's why we have provided a search filter here, and so you can find artists, and then if you look up a particular artist, and then it will tell you, oh, we have 2 works by this particular artist, and then the format, we have things like fan painting, hand scroll, hanging scroll, and then period. You can look up things. Oh, there are 2 12th century works, 2 14th century works, etc., etc. But so this is again not particularly new in the technology field, but which is something that is quite useful to the user. But I think what might be new in our case is that we have conceived of a new category called different groups. Because we believe that the visitor will need some kind of orientation in going through our collection. And from the museum standpoint, of course, we want to draw the visitors to some of our masterpieces. So if you're just throwing 150 pieces on the internet and then just, okay, yeah, here, go ahead and search it, then people may get lost. So that's why the way that these images are arranged is that we put up first of all our masterpieces towards the top, and then the masterpiece is basically what this group 1 stands for, and then group 2 refers to objects that are perfectly genuine, and except that they are kind of average in quality. Now, so this is a very subjective judgment, which is why we chose the more neutral terms such as group 1 as opposed to masterpieces versus, in group 2 where we would just call it group 2 as opposed to, fine art or whatever. But as far as the treatment is concerned, the group 2 pieces have a much shorter scholarly entry, because for the group 1 essays, we have invited important scholars to contribute about 3,000 to 5,000 word essay to them. So it's a fairly substantial discussion. And then for the group 2 works, we have enlisted the help of graduate students who would write anywhere between 500 to 1,000 words. So it's a much shorter entry, but at the same time, it is still quite scholarly in contents that is footnoted and so on and so forth. And then group 4 are our problematic works that may not be genuine. And in that group, basically, all we have done is to provide a detailed image, as well as some tombstone information. But I think the true renovation in this grouping system is it's group 3. Group three is basically the liminal, basically works that do not have any that do not have much scholarly content, and they are mostly works that have been acquired in recent years. As I said in the very beginning, one of the goals of this catalog is to draw attention to the collection and hoping that we will raise the profile and therefore to develop the collection in the long run. And luckily, that wish actually did, that did happen. In fact, in the 5-year period between 2008 and 2013, the painting and calligraphy collection increased by 30%. So that was a very substantial increase. You can imagine in 2009, 2010, when we had these extra, 20 or 30 pieces of things that we just recently acquired, we had to face the decision: do we include these new acquisitions into the catalog, or do we not? Well, first of all, when we planned this project, when we budgeted for this project, we had not anticipated these new acquisitions would come in. So we don't have the resources for them. But at the same time, some of these works were so important that we thought it would be a real shame to not include them. So how should we tackle this problem? And by that time, by 2009, 2010, research was well underway. Gallery system was already, doing the wireframes and doing all that kind of stuff. So how do you accommodate these new acquisitions? And then we come up with a solution that, okay, well, let's just create a group 3. That is, these are the new acquisitions, and that basically the point is to show the visitors that yes, we have this group of works that do not have a substantive scholarly essay, but at the same time, this is what we have. And so now the way that we have fashioned group 3 is that we invite scholars, established or not junior scholars, to contribute an essay, an original essay on each of these works, and then depending on the quality of their analysis, we will group them, we will move objects in this group to upgrade them into either group 1 or group 2. So I think this is our long-term solution in accommodating new acquisitions, and then to make sure that the catalog can grow together with the collection. Now, so simply put, this is not new technology. This is just very simple technology. But at the same time, I think this is a very innovative way of making sure that the catalog does not get outdated very easily. And I think I'm going very quickly over my time. So let me just go to my last slide, which is the lessons learned. Now, in contrary to general assumption, doing an online catalog is not cheap. It is extremely expensive, and it's not the easy way out. But then the refreshing lesson for a conventionally trained art historian, myself, is that sometimes you can have a very simple solution for what to the scholars may appear to be a very complicated problem. That is, when I thought about, how do we deal with this group of new acquisitions? And then we come up with a solution, which is to add the extra group. That turned out to be an easy problem for Jay's team. That's not an issue, we just put up another group. But sometimes there are things that might appear to the scholar to be a very easy fix, but then turn out to be an extremely difficult problem for Jay's team. For instance, when we have the albums and then we want to change the orientation, maybe we can say a bit more about that. That turned out to have significant cost implication. Now, another lesson that I've learned is that you might want to have it. The Getty's premise was that if you do an online catalog, it should have the same scholarly rigor as a printed catalog. And I think we have lived up to that expectations. The catalog has been peer-reviewed. We are very clear about things that we have provided detailed essays and scholarly essays, and for things that do not have those kind of scholarly information. But not having those kind of scholarly information for the group 3 does not mean that the catalog was kind of treated casually, that we don't pay any attention to it, that it does not have the same scholarly rigor. But I think from my standpoint, it would be much better in the future. I mean, if I'm given another opportunity to do an online catalog, I would now prefer to start with a collection of which there is existing scholarship that we can repurpose from the online environment. And the reason for that is because in this 5-year period, we spent so much time in really trying to create new scholarship to the extent that finally, when we get to a point where we were in a position to put in data, this process was actually not straightforward at all. And for instance, earlier, let's just go to the slide to give you one example, just a quick example. In the search filter, there is a a subject tab, okay? So basically, this is a way to kind of orient it's one way to orient the user. Some people may be interested in landscape painting, some people may be interested in cursive script calligraphy, some people may be interested in horse painting, and so on and so forth. So when I first started doing this catalog, I basically created a kind of a tag word for each of this work. So I would call this painting here, oh, this is a figure painting, and this is also a buffalo painting, and I will also say this is an animal painting, this is also a landscape painting, and so I put in a bunch of words. For each work, I did the same exercise. And then later on, what I find is that then the subject, under the subject filter, I had like 30 to 50 categories. That just seemed way too much. And so only until when we have put up the entire collection online can I go back to this subject filter and start to revise. Well, maybe I don't have to have this one category for pine painting because the museum only has one pine painting. So maybe I would just delete that word pine under the tag and just and let tree do the job. And then under tree there are like three works. So this is an area in which I've kind of underestimated about the time that it will take me to do. Okay. So, and then another thing was the length of the inscription, because as I mentioned earlier, one of the contributions of this catalog is that we have provided translations and transcriptions of the calligraphy. But then when our intern, when our research assistant put up that kind of information, she wasn't sure, well, how long should that inscription be? Because that really depends on how big the screen is. So to some extent, the data entry person kind of doubles as a graphic designer, because sometimes, oh, maybe for this particular work, we can include 2 verses, but then for the other work, we include 3 lines. And so this is something, again, that we have not come up with we haven't thought about clearly in advance. And then another thing was, in doing a catalog like this, unlike a book, which you go from one end to another end, the online catalog, you have to think about the priority of the information that you want to present to the public. So what do you put in the homepage? That is an issue that we have not really thought about seriously until much later. And then so these are some of the things. Now I'm going to come to a very controversial point, which is who should be the project management project manager for an online catalog. Yesterday we had a discussion in Linda's workshop, and we discussed we should be people with specialized knowledge. But I am a keen believer that the curator should be the project manager for 2 reasons. The first reason is that the curator would have the vision for the catalog, and they would know what, they would adhere to that vision. And the second reason is that that is not to say that the curator should not be bothered with technology, but rather the curator should work very closely with the digital team to learn about what the curator does not know, and then to factor his ignorance in the technology field into his timeline, into his workflow. But a reason why the new media manager or the technology person should not be the project manager it's because for the past 5 years, we have actually had 3 new media manager. I mean, it's just a reality that the new media team, new media folks, there's just a lot quicker turnover in any given museum. So to do any substantial catalog online, that sustainable, personnel it's consistency in personnel is quite important. And the second thing is, given the nature of the work of the new media manager, he or she will constantly be tempted by new technology, to the extent that if you think about when we first this project in 2008, the iPad was not in existence, right? And not to mention any mobile apps. That was not anything that we discussed. So if the new media manager were to be the project manager for a project like this, he or she may be tempted, oh, well, in that case, how do we fit the catalog into the mobile app? So they might be tempted to explore other technologies. So that's what I think is important, again, for the curator to just, to keep the focus on the catalog itself. And finally, I think it's important for the team to have institutional buy-in, because you will be amazed by how much time or how many times you have to beg your registrar to do the work on registration and to get the works to be photographed, re-photographed. Now, but then two things, lessons to be learned, which is something that we are not sure yet, but something that we're looking closely into, is the relevance of multiple voices and changing authorship. Because the catalog was written by various scholars, so there's an inconsistency in voice. Some peer reviewers have kind of criticized that, but at the same time, we know that some people are not likely to be reading the catalog from front to end. Some people may just be looking at very specific aspects of each work or aspects of a particular work, and therefore, this consistency may not be as important in the online format as it is in a book. So that we will have to see how that plays out. And then again, the changing authorship is something that you may want to be aware of. I have left the Seattle Art Museum. I do not have access to the Google Analytics of this website. So I do not know how many people have registered for the website. I try to ask my colleagues, and now that I have left, so I don't get my response as promptly as I used to. And now I can still say that I'm the author of this catalog, and I know this project inside out better than anyone else on earth. But in 10 years' time, when the collection continues to grow, when there may be new changes, new features, what is my role going to be? Okay. So that was something that actually came up when some junior scholars asked me for advice as to, oh, I know that you guys are doing online catalog. I want to do that too. I want it. Well, is it important for you to keep ownership of this project 10 years from now? Do you know that you will be proud of this product 10 years from now? Because because you may not have control over this project 20 years later. So that was something that came up. And then finally, as to whether we will get the contributions that we want from the community is something that we wait to see. So I'm sorry that I've gone overboard, but thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you.